The Republican hearing on sanctuary cities. Are our Democratic friends on the way? Should we wait? Do we know if they're coming? Could somebody find that out? I will go ahead and make sure our Democratic colleagues can have their time and ask their questions. So we're the Budget Committee, the mighty Budget Committee that did reconciliation, and thank you very much. Greetings. Right on cue. I would hope this committee would take round two and see if we can do something on reconciliation in round two. But that'd be up to a group of us and talk to the leadership about that. But this hearing today, I think, is timely. We're trying to look at the budget impact of a policy called sanctuary cities. Now, there are 200, I think, cities, 14 states, we got a chart here somewhere, that engage in the practice of sanctuary cities. Now, what is that practice? Local officials, state, local officials, basically have adopted a policy of not turning over to the federal government illegal immigrants subject to being turned over because they don't like the policy. They don't want to engage in deporting these people. Now, under President Obama, I think 3 million people were deported. Now, I don't believe any Republican refused to work with the federal government to deport these people. And when President Obama deported 3 million people, it was called being strong and good government. When we try to deport people as a result of being invaded by illegal immigrants for 4 years under the Biden administration, we're Nazis and bad guys. I don't buy that at all. I think most Americans would like to get control over our country and sovereignty over our nation. Immigration done right can be a tremendous benefit to the country. When you obliterate the borders for 4 years and people from all over the world flood in, you got a problem. And it needs to be fixed and cleaned up. As to ICE, if we can make ICE more professional, if we can do things at DHS that make it more professional, count me in. I think Mark Wayne Mullen would be a great secretary to do that. But to my Democratic colleagues, we'll never fix illegal immigration until you get to the source of the problem. And one of the problems we have is magnets to encourage future illegal immigration. Now, I've got 12 sanctuary states, 200 cities. There are 25,000 people that ICE had a detainer on that were refused to be turned over. Next one. We believe it endangers public safety. 10,000 criminals released by sanctuary policies who went on to be arrested for additional crimes. They should have been turned over. They weren't. They stayed in the country and they committed crimes. $9 billion in fraud that we know of, and probably growing. 59% of legal immigrant households on government welfare programs costing taxpayers $42 billion a year. Well, that's some real money. Let me give you a real life example of what happens when you don't do this right. Fairfax. I think we're going to hear here in a minute from one of our sheriffs. Fairfax police warned prosecutors about repeat offender months before deadly bus stop stabbing. And this gentleman here, Bella, what's his name? Jalal, was in custody and had a pretty bad rap sheet. People in the prosecution business say, don't release this, deport this guy, turn him over. Don't release him. That was good advice. It was not taken. This young lady here, Stephanie Minter, was murdered by this man. And we had this man in detention in Fairfax County, and they refused to turn him over for deportation. He was allowed to stay in the county, and the rest is history. A young mom is dead because of that decision. And who was this guy? He came to the country in 2012. He was arrested 30 times, rape, malicious wounding, and assault. 2020, ICE submits a formal detainer to deport him. The request is blocked by Virginia's attorney for Fairfax County, a source-backed prosecutor and defender of sanctuary cities who ignored the detainer. On May 2025, he was arrested once more for stabbing an individual in the leg, but was again released. 30 arrests, May 2025, stabbed somebody in the leg, let him go again. February 2026, just months later, he murders Miss Minter. I'm not okay with that. I think that's offensive to who we are as a rule of law nation, to the people in Fairfax County, to this district attorney. I wish we could find a way for these people to sue you and make you pay a heavy price for ignoring your legal obligations under federal law and showing such poor judgment. How many arrests is necessary? How many people need to be stabbed before a guy like that is deported? And what's the upside of keeping him here? Is this the model citizen we want to keep in America? Now, there's an ideology around Sanctuary City that needs to be broken, and we're here to break it. I've got legislation designed to change this dynamic. Going forward, if a local official or a governor, anybody, refuses to cooperate with federal government in turning over people subject to deportation under federal law, they can be prosecuted because they should be prosecuted. You got to make it so that those who hang on to these illegal immigrants in defiance of federal law, that they feel the pain, not just the public. So my hope is that we can find a way forward to break the cycle of the damage being done from sanctuary cities, the cost incurred to the taxpayer, and what happened to Stephanie just like never happens again. We're not going to quit on this. If you want to defend it, you're welcome to do it. And this is not going away. You'll never have rational immigration as long as you have 12 states saying if you get here, you never leave. You're never going to fix this if you have 200 cities that practice sanctuary policy, because the illegal immigrant believes I can get there and never leave. I've tried to work with Democrats, like many over here, to find a rational solution to our illegal immigration problem. We're not going to ignore 4 years of where Joe Biden obliterated our border. People came in from all over the world by tens of millions, flown into the interior of the country, and only God knows where they're at. Look at the number of people on the terrorist watch list, and highest gone up 2,700%, 21, 22, 23. Where are these people? They don't know. I asked. Nobody knows where they're at. So in this invasion during the Biden administration, we had 11,000 murderers. Look at the number of people on the terrorist watch list. They're in our country, and we don't know where they're at. So what we're going to do is be willing to reform ICE, try to fix problems that we've seen, but we're not going to give up on the idea that we need to right wrongs here and deport people that present danger and try to regain control over our immigration system. To my Democratic colleagues, what is the answer to sanctuary cities? Is it to continue the policy? Is it to eliminate the policy? All of us say eliminate it. I think the public is with us by like 80%. And until we eliminate the policy, you're going to see more and more stories like I just described. It is now time to call the question on sanctuary cities. Will it be the norm going forward in America, or will it change? To my colleagues on this side of the aisle, thank you for supporting this effort. We're fully committed to eliminating sanctuary cities for the good of the country. To my Democratic colleagues, we'd love to join with you in a rational way to do some things to make ICE more professional. But what you need to do in return is work with us to eliminate one of the biggest magnets to future illegal immigration, which is sanctuary city policy. With that, Senator Merkley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's been a year since we've had a meeting of this Budget Committee, and a lot has happened in that last year. Of course, one of the big things that happened was a piece of legislation that Trump called his big, beautiful bill, but most of us consider it a big, ugly betrayal of the American citizen. What did it proceed to do? Slash nutrition for hungry children, gutted health care for millions of families, enormously increased the wealth of the already wealthiest in our country. That's certainly not government by and for the people, that's government by and for the powerful. And it massively increased our national debt, estimated to be a $30 trillion increase over the next 30 years. And if interest rates are 1% higher than used in CBO model, call that a $50 trillion increase in national debt over the next 30 years. And it also massively increased the budget for ICE. I don't think you'll see many changes in budgets that look like this. You won't see a leap like this for housing in America, a fundamental need for families. You won't see this for health care in America. In fact, health care was savaged by the big, ugly bill. You won't see this for education in America, but you certainly see it for ICE. Now, these issues of the impact on nutrition budgets and healthcare budgets and housing budgets and deficit and debt and the budget for ICE, those are all very good topics for this committee to hold a hearing on. But we haven't held a hearing on that. Now, Trump has turned ICE into secret police. I can't believe that we now have secret police in America, but we do. I well recall studying secret police back when I was in college, and the basic mark of them was they'd show up in unmarked vans, unmarked uniforms, no judicial warrant, knock down doors without a judicial warrant, grab people, detain them, and often prevent them from having access and communication with families or lawyers. All of that's happening right now in America. We now have a secret police called ICE. And it's a tremendous black spot on our nation that this has happened under this administration. Freedom and privacy, laws, norms, and our Constitution all shredded. Heartbreakingly, 3 American citizens have been killed by ICE. Renee Good, Alex Preddy in Minnesota, and Ruben Ray Martinez in Texas. Now, when ICE killed Ruben Ray Martinez, they hid the fact. So most Americans aren't aware that a third individual was killed. But recent reporting by CBS News obtained the body cam footage showing him being killed by an ICE officer in March of 2025. Now, ICE's budget has been increased by a factor of 7. The way that it operates has been dramatically changed from the norms of law and justice in a democratic republic to the strategy of secret police in an authoritarian regime. That would be a very good topic for a hearing, given how much ICE's budget has increased, and we should be holding and examining that question. Wars come with enormous costs. We know that the wars in the Middle East and Afghanistan and Iraq were staggering in terms of blood and treasure. More than 7,000 Americans killed, more than 50,000 Americans injured, often life-altering injuries, more than $6 trillion of national treasure expended. So here we are. America's at war. That'd be a good topic for a budget hearing. 7 U.S. service members already killed. The Pentagon estimating $1 billion a day. In fact, some of my colleagues have said it's $2 billion a day. A big change in expenditures and revenues. But none of those are the topics of today's hearing, the first we've had in a year. But we do have this topic that my colleague has pointed out, sanctuary cities. Well, sanctuary is a bit of a misnomer. Sanctuary states and cities are not places that are a safe haven where immigrants cannot be detained or deported. It refers to the decision that local police will serve as local police and not be commandeered to be assistant ICE agents. These policies are rooted in the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. And my colleagues across the aisle like to lean on states' rights. It's certainly a state right to refuse to have its local police commandeered to be assistant ICE agents. Assistants now to ICE operating as a secret police in the United States of America. So the idea that local police do local police work and ICE agents do ICE work is protected by our Constitution. But there's also a public safety rationale behind it. We know that when local police serve as local police, they build relationships with the community and decrease crime. Research shows that jurisdictions that choose for local police to be local police and not assistants to a secret police, refusing to be commandeered as a federal agent, they have a higher median household income, they have less poverty, they have less reliance on public assistance, they have lower unemployment. Those all sound like pretty good things to me. And they have lower crime rates. A 2022 study found that allowing local police to be local police, not commandeered to be assistant ICE agents, results in a decrease in crime rates in those communities. And why? Well, because in places where they do get commandeered to be assistant ICE agents, they get less information, less trust, less ability to prosecute, and crime goes up. So if my colleagues are all for crime, then persist in trying to violate the 10th Amendment and the wise wisdom of those states that see the wise separation with different roles. And there's nothing about local police being local police that hampers federal immigration enforcement. In fact, when people are arrested, fingerprints, data, crime are all put into a national database. So the federal government has all it needs. And if it wants to make sure that a person is handed over at the time that a person is completing their sentence in a local or state institution, all they have to do is get a judicial warrant. A judicial warrant. That's all that's required. We've already seen the harm that happens when the executive branch tells the executive branch that it's okay to override Americans' civil rights. reason we have separation of powers in our Constitution, something being seriously eroded under this administration. So as a reminder, each of these issues, slashing nutrition assistance, gutting health care, increasing the wealth of billionaires, exploding deficits and debts, transforming ICE into a secret police, launching a war, are all appropriate issues this budget committee should be focused on. But the decision by cities and states to enhance public safety by having local police focus on local police issues is not a new change. And so it's puzzling to me why that's the decision for this first hearing in a year. What we know is that states and cities that let local police be local police do pretty damn well. With that in mind, I've invited two expert witnesses to join us today. Mr. David Beer from the Cato Institute, an expert on sanctuary policies and the broader concerns about the Department of Homeland Security and its $170 billion for immigration enforcement with little accountability or oversight. Joining him is Mr. Brendan Duke from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which focuses on critical budgetary concerns, including how the big, ugly betrayal law exploded our debt and raised the costs for working families. So I appreciate both of you joining us today. And while he's not able to join us for today's hearing, Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield has written a statement, and it explains how the home states, my home state, Oregon, how their policies to let police be police has assisted and helped him and the law enforcement officers keep Oregon communities safe. As he notes in his statement, Oregon's police policies have peacefully coexisted with 7 presidential administrations. Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter his statement into the record.
Okay.
And I also ask unanimous consent to submit a statement for the record from the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, which states, quote, "When local departments are pressured to prioritize federal immigration objectives, officer time and resources are diverted from serious threats such as violent crime, domestic violence, and community safety concerns. The result is a policing environment that is less effective and less trusted." Creating a less effective and less trusted local public safety environment should not be the objective of the federal legislature. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So the novel approach, the 10th Amendment protects sanctuary cities. I hadn't heard that one, but we'll talk about that later. So our witnesses are former Secretary Chad Wolf, Acting Secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security from 2019 to 2020, and the current Homeland Security Immigration Chair of the American First Policy Institute. Sheriff Michael Chapman has been the sheriff of Loudoun County, Virginia, since 2012. I think you're next door to Fairfax County. You can tell us about that. Ms. Jessica Vaughn is Director of Policy Studies at the Center for Immigration Studies, where she has worked since 1992. Welcome to you all. If you'd rise and raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give this committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Welcome to you all. Mr. Wolf.
Well, thank you, Chairman Graham and Ranking Member Merkley, for the opportunity to testify before the committee today. What we now commonly call sanctuary cities was born nearly 50 years ago in California, and since then has exploded nationwide. According to the Department of Justice, 12 states, District of Columbia, as well as 22 other jurisdictions for now are officially considered sanctuary jurisdictions. But as the chairman said, there are likely hundreds more. According to a 2024 report, nearly 8 million illegal aliens resided in those jurisdictions, and 1 in every 3 Americans, or 120 million Americans, live in sanctuary jurisdictions. To be clear, this is not a localized phenomenon. Ultimately, sanctuary policies affect every American. And so while not all sanctuary jurisdictions have the exact same policies, they all share a core belief that it is acceptable and even justified to ignore illegal immigration and violations of our immigration law. But our law is clear. Title 8, Section 1227 clearly states that aliens who enter the U.S. illegally or otherwise in the U.S. without lawful authorization are in fact removable. That is the mission of ICE. The law goes on to address those who harbor illegal aliens. Title 8, Section 1324 states that any person who encourages or induces an alien to come, enter, or reside in the U.S., knowing or in reckless disregard of the fact of such coming to, entry, or residence, will be a violation of law. Now, due to the Supremacy Clause and a long list of judicial opinions interpreting that, states do not have the authority to pick and choose which federal laws are recognized and enforced. And they do not have the authority to nullify federal laws by ignoring them or proactively creating obstacles to their effectiveness. Tragically, sanctuary policies are unleashing devastating consequences for the American people, particularly those that live in those jurisdictions. In California, again, the birthplace of the sanctuary movement, local politicians released 4,641 criminal aliens from local jails in 2025, rather than handing them over to ICE for removal. Those criminals included aliens that had committed homicide, assault, sexual predatory offenses, and burglary. And just weeks ago, as the chairman indicated, in Fairfax County, just miles from where we are today, a criminal illegal alien with more than 30 arrests fatally stabbed a woman in the neck. In that county, Fairfax County, has been a sanctuary for almost a decade, and this is the tragic result. Despite the dangerous nature of sanctuary jurisdictions, there are some that will not stop until we've become a sanctuary nation, largely free from all border enforcement and immigration enforcement. Calls for ICE-free zones, detention bans, and even an outright abolishment of ICE are becoming increasingly common. The evidence is clear. To restore the rule of law, common sense, and public safety, the era of sanctuary jurisdictions need to come to an end permanently. Thankfully, President Trump and numerous states are taking action, but legal challenges persist, and sanctuary jurisdictions are still largely able to exist under current law. Congress should take action. In my written testimony, I've outlined several recommendations to address this issue, including the need to hold local officials accountable for knowingly violating the law. Let us heed the lessons that we've learned from tragedies unfolding in cities like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Seattle, San Francisco, and others. The American people are safer when state and local governments cooperate with federal immigration agencies. State and local governments should give our agents access to their jails and prisons so that federal agents can screen prisoners, determine their immigration status, process removable aliens, and transfer custody to federal authorities once an alien is released. This requires little effort from local governments, yet under sanctuary policy, state and local officials often slam the door shut on immigration officers. I'd like to close with a simple question for those who continue to support sanctuary policies. How many more Americans need to die at the hands of illegal aliens released by sanctuary jurisdictions? Sanctuary cities must become an artifact of American history rather than the ongoing safe haven for drug dealers, narco-terrorists, murderers, and dangerous people who threaten the safety and the security of the American people. And let me just end on a comment made by the ranking member talking about secret police. I think that's an outrageous comment. I think the men and women of ICE are sworn law enforcement officers. They do their job. They're trained to do their job. They have a very dangerous job in what they do. And to continue to denigrate their job and how they go about it in such a dangerous environment, I think is a disservice to them.
Mr. Chairman, since the testimony involves the comment I made, I will just reply that if you don't want to be secret police, don't act like secret police. And I laid out the factual basis on exactly all the qualities that they are utilizing now that are the hallmark of secret police around the world. Thank you.
Chairman Graham, Ranking Member Senator Merkley, and other members of the committee. I am Loudoun County Sheriff Mike Chapman and lead Virginia's most complex and largest full-service sheriff's office, employing over 900. Loudoun County sits just outside of Washington, D.C., and is home to Leesburg, Middleburg, and the Dulles International Airport. In Loudoun County, we celebrate a diverse community, have an extraordinarily diverse workforce, welcome everyone here that's here legally, and within our organization speak over 25 different languages. I have served 47 years in this profession as a local police officer, a career DEA Special Agent, and for the past 14 years as an elected sheriff. I am honored to sit before you today to discuss our mutual concern of sanctuary cities and counties. I am fortunate that Loudoun County is part of a traditional form of government that enables a sheriff to conduct all law enforcement, jail, and court operations under one roof, essentially making me both a sheriff and a police chief. This differs significantly from our surrounding jurisdictions where appointed county, city, and town police chiefs are the norm. Loudoun's form of government has enabled me to make decisions in the best interests of our citizens, free of mandated political agendas. It has also allowed me to be the only Republican law enforcement leader in all of Northern Virginia. That responsibility is a double-edged sword. While I don't answer to our 7-2 Democrat Board of Supervisors for policy decisions, I do receive my budget from them. This dichotomy causes significant friction, making this a very challenging area. Our system of government, however, provides our citizens with a check and balance. We endured a 2-year battle with our Board of Supervisors who pursued converting our sheriff's office into a police department several years ago to exercise complete power and control over our agency. We defeated this aggressive action because our citizens ultimately decided that they prefer having a direct voice in who leads their public safety through the election process. This system and our common sense approach to problems putting citizens first is why the Sheriff's Office has been awarded favorite government service for 2 years running in our local newspaper, and why I've been selected as favorite public servant for the past 5 years. Regarding immigration, it is important to distinguish criminal aliens who pose a threat to our community from immigrants here legally. Consequently, while our surrounding jurisdictions choose to be sanctuaries, not make this distinction, and not honor ICE detainers, we do just the opposite. We have always cooperated with all of our state, local, and federal counterparts, including ICE, and have routinely notified ICE of those in our custody for criminal offenses who also had active detainers issued by ICE regardless of the presidential administration. We honor all detainers and warrants from other law enforcement jurisdictions, just as I would expect them to honor ours. These practices likely contribute to why our agency has the lowest crime rate in the entire Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area and is one of the safest counties in the entire United States. That doesn't mean we're exempt from problems related to illegal immigration. In 2024, we experienced 5 homicides, 3 of which were committed by people here illegally. 2 of the 3 were committed by an MS-13 gang member. In a neighboring county, one that refuses to contact ICE regarding the criminals they arrest, 2 homicides were committed in just over the past 2 months. One occurred within 24 hours after the criminal who had an outstanding ICE detainer on him was released from jail without any notification to ICE. The other, police questioned why the subject had been released and warned the prosecutor of danger, stating not if but when he would assault again, resulting in a grandmother being stabbed to death at a bus stop. This exemplifies what happens with sanctuary counties. Law enforcement's hands are tied by politicians and political agendas. Last year, I signed a 287G Warrant Service Officer Program agreement, which enabled us to hold a person arrested for a criminal violation an additional 48 hours for ICE in the event ICE couldn't pick them up immediately. This enabled us to safely turn over criminal illegal aliens to ICE who otherwise would have been released into our community and could pose an additional threat to our residents. This simple process has kept ICE from having to conduct street operations in our area. I have told my community that not turning over criminal aliens to ICE who could endanger our residents would be irresponsible and dangerous to the very people I've sworn an oath to protect. This process, which has worked well for us, is likely to become far more challenging considering the legislation currently in motion in Richmond. Our governor rescinded the previous administration's executive order which enabled jurisdictions to cooperate with ICE. This was followed by legislation proposed by both houses of our General Assembly, which, if passed and signed by the governor, will likely require judicial warrants from ICE for local law enforcement to act on anything. Considering immigration is a civil offense, this action will no doubt force us to release detainees incarcerated by us for criminal offenses unrelated to immigration back into our communities where they could pose an additional threat to our citizens. If this committee can exercise any leverage to influence a different outcome, I am confident that law enforcement officials throughout Virginia and other locations who are familiar with these challenges would be grateful. We take our job seriously and want to keep all of our citizens safe. Thank you for your attention, and look forward to answering any questions.
Good morning, and thank you. More than half of removable aliens live in those jurisdictions that have sanctuary policies intended to hinder immigration enforcement and prohibit cooperation between state and local law enforcement and federal immigration enforcement, which is almost always a violation of federal law and imposes enormous costs on taxpayers. My organization has been tracking these policies since 2015, and we maintain a list and map of jurisdictions and policies on our website. Those who promote sanctuary policies often claim that they're needed to build trust with immigrants so that they'll report crimes or to avoid distracting local law enforcement agencies with immigration enforcement. These claims are disproven and disingenuous. In fact, sanctuary policies are an irrational political response based on disagreement with federal immigration policy and opposition to enforcement of immigration laws. The motivations for sanctuary policies are ideological and political, but the cost of sanctuary policies is unfortunately very tangible. First, the public safety costs. And these are the most significant and problematic. Between October of 2022 and February of 2025, sanctuary jurisdictions refused more than 26,000 detainers for criminal aliens. Half of these were in California, and large numbers also were released in Illinois, Virginia, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. The individual jails that released the most were Santa Clara County, California, Cook County, Illinois, and Fairfax County, Virginia. In 2024 alone, the Fairfax County Sheriff declined to honor 744 detainers for criminals that she had in custody. That's more than 2 a day. Some of these are gang members with long rap sheets who get arrested over and over, costing county taxpayers untold sums in repeated crimes, prosecution, and incarceration. Others are child predators and sex offenders. Oregon is another place that protects criminal aliens with strict sanctuary policies. Last fall, ICE actually had to issue subpoenas just to try to get 4 Oregon sheriffs to share information on violent felons who had been released despite ICE detainers. They had convictions for rape, assault, child exploitation, and kidnapping, among other crimes. What possible reason can there be for not cooperating with ICE for their removal? It's certainly not a public safety reason. And it seems as if they actually want to make immigration enforcement as costly and labor-intensive as possible. Besides blocking law enforcement agencies from cooperating with ICE, sanctuary states typically have other policies that attract illegal settlement and thus burden taxpayers with support of illegal immigrants. Besides funding emergency health care and schooling for all, a number of sanctuary states go farther and choose to provide Medicaid, subsidized health insurance, nutrition assistance, housing, and much more. Illegal immigrants use these welfare programs in large numbers. My organization has found that over 60% of illegal alien-headed households are using at least one form of welfare program, and usually more than one, at a cost of tens of billions of dollars to taxpayers. This is why any resources spent on immigration enforcement actually save taxpayer money in the long run. It is my repeated observation that the politicians who support sanctuary policies are not moved by the costs or the pain their policies have caused American families. Victims like Stephanie Minter, Denny McCann, Drew Rosenberg, Matthew Denise, Dominic Durden, Laken Riley, and Kate Steinle, and so many others. These are priceless lives lost to sanctuary policies, and it's wrong to trivialize their loss as a statistical blip. Some states like South Carolina, Florida, and Texas have banned sanctuary policies. The Trump administration is making progress through outreach and litigation, but while the federal government likely cannot force sanctuary jurisdictions to do the right thing, it can create consequences for sanctuaries. Congress needs to create additional consequences like disqualification from certain federal funding, so that taxpayers are not subsidizing sanctuaries. Congress should also clarify that state and local police have the authority to cooperate with immigration enforcement so that they can't be blocked from doing it by state or local laws. In addition, those who are seriously harmed as a result of sanctuary policies should have some resource in the courts. Thank you.
Chairman Graham, Ranking Member Merkley, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. For half a century, the Cato Institute's research has shown that people, whatever their ancestry, background, or birthplace, can thrive in a free society. Immigrants come to work for us and with us to make our lives better. They work at higher rates and are nearly twice as likely to start businesses here. Immigrants have reduced government deficits by $14.5 trillion over the last 30 years. And yet, Congress has not updated the legal immigration system during that entire time. So just 3% of all legal immigrant applicants were approved in 2024. Rather than fix this broken system, the new administration banned half of all the legal immigrants who had made it to the end of that process, including spouses and children of U.S. citizens. The fallout from this flawed system is left to our cities to manage. In many areas, 1 in 5 residents lives with someone here illegally. Mass deportation is not an option for these places. It is an attack on them. It is taking Americans away from their spouses, parents, pastors, parishioners, employees, employers, customers, and friends. It's not us Americans versus them immigrants. Cities know immigrants are part of us. They also know that immigrants are here to build, not destroy. A mountain, literally a mountain of research proves that immigrants and reasonable limits on participation with ICE do not increase crime rates. Immigrants, even illegal immigrants, are half as likely to be incarcerated for crimes in the United States. According to DHS, only about 3% of illegal immigrants have any criminal convictions. Immigrants reduce crime rates, which means you're less likely to be a victim of a crime. Let me be clear. When a non-citizen does victimize someone, they should be convicted, imprisoned, and deported. But it is DHS that has ignored this formula. Just 28% of the people detained by ICE right now were convicted of any crime at all. This is no surprise. DHS has abandoned its public safety mission. It has stripped millions of vetted immigrants of their legal status just so that it could deport them. Instead of protecting us, DHS violates the Constitution. Its masked agents invade our homes without warrants. They detain without evidence, and they deport without due process. They intimidate, beat, and even kill Americans who protest. They arrest legal immigrants for writing opinion articles. They lie to the courts, and then they ignore them. With all this unconstitutional mayhem, Congress should not itself violate the Constitution by threatening local law enforcement, not for interfering with ICE, but rather for following their own local laws that they swore an oath to uphold. Under our system of federalism and the Constitution, Congress can't force cities to do its bidding, whether on immigration, guns, or the environment. If Congress wants cities to help DHS, it'll need those cities to trust DHS. But to get trust, you need to be trustworthy. And this DHS is not. Consider this, before this administration, non-citizens were more likely to report serious crimes to the police than the US-born population. Now, DHS is arresting immigrant crime victims. For example, in Iowa, a shooting victim who helped bring to justice violent robbers was arrested by ICE before he had even healed. But since he had a pending charge for an unpaid traffic ticket, ICE considers him a criminal. This has caused filings for U visas for crime victims working with police to drop by 63%. This is not making Americans safer. Congress must require DHS to focus on real threats, and it must empower Americans to sue federal agents for violating the Constitution. We need accountability and constitutionality to restore trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Graham, Ranking Member Merkley, and members of the Budget Committee. My name is Brendan Duke, and I'm Senior Director for Federal Budget Policy at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. The Center on Budget is a nonpartisan research and policy institute that advances federal and state policies to help build a country where everyone has the resources they need to thrive and share the nation's prosperity. Let me first begin with an overview of our fiscal situation for the Budget Committee. Analyses typically focus on government spending and revenue as shares of the economy. In 2025, revenue was 17%, which is around the same level as in 1985. Programmatic spending, on the other hand, grew 0.7 of a percentage point since 1985. But Social Security and Medicare are responsible for more than 100% of the increase in spending because the country has gotten older. That is nobody's fault. I'm sure everyone on this committee wishes they had the same knees or back they did 40 years ago. Similarly, we all wish we had the demographics and ratio of working-age Americans to retirees that we had 40 years ago. The combination of population aging and basic arithmetic means we will face a choice between raising revenue past the 17% of GDP level set when the country's demographics were more favorable, or making drastic cuts to important programs. The retirement of the baby boom was a predictable and predicted development. But at the beginning of the 21st century, we had a fiscal system that would deliver adequate projected revenue to meet our needs. Rounds of unpaid for tax cuts ruined that. Take a look at projections for 2025 that were made right before most of the Bush tax cuts were made permanent and before anyone even thought of the Trump tax cuts, and compare them to the actual 2025 numbers. The 2025 deficit is much higher than projected in 2012, despite programmatic spending being lower than projected. The reason the deficit rose is revenues come in far lower than projected as a result of those unpaid for tax cuts. Importantly, Social Security, Medicare, and other health programs such as Medicaid and premium tax credits also came in below CBO's 2012 projections. What all of this ultimately shows is that it's entirely possible to meet our commitments to seniors while ensuring millions of low and moderate income Americans have health care and food if we are willing to raise the revenue to do so. Instead, Congress made a different choice last summer. The giant reconciliation bill adds $3.4 trillion to the deficit as it extends tax cuts tilted to the wealthy despite cutting SNAP and Medicaid by about 20% by 2034. CBO more recently estimated this figure at $4.7 trillion over the new budget window and including interest. Notably, this $3.4 trillion cost is higher than the cost of extending all of the expiring tax cuts for all families, including for millionaires, but without the cuts to SNAP and Medicaid. And it would have cost far less than to extend the tax cuts for the 98% of families making under $400,000 without those cuts to SNAP and Medicaid. In other words, the cuts to healthcare and food assistance in the reconciliation bill were entirely the result of Congress's choice to load the bill with tax cuts beyond the 2017 tax cuts, along with large increases for defense and immigration enforcement. The result is millions of low-income families will lose the ability to afford the high cost of groceries or go to the doctor when they're sick, cuts that a vast majority of the public staunchly oppose. Moreover, the entire cost of the tax cut was essentially offset by the Trump administration's decision to raise taxes on imported goods. Cutting income taxes financed by taxes on imported goods is a poor trade. It is both economically inefficient and further pushes the burden of financing the government from high-income to low- and middle-income families. In fact, the combo of the Trump administration's tariff regime and the spending cuts on the reconciliation bill will leave households in the bottom 70% worse off. The Supreme Court last month handed the Trump administration an opportunity to save face by ruling that many of these sweeping tariffs were illegal. Instead of using the court decision to back down on a failed policy, Trump has instead replaced the struck-down tariffs with a sweeping 10 to 15% across-the-board tariff. I think we can all agree that the steps required to significantly improve the outlook, whether through revenue increases, program cuts, or both, can be politically challenging. Immigration can reduce the need for those difficult measures. Immigrants contribute to our communities and the U.S. economy in many ways. In particular, they improve our fiscal outlook by boosting our national birth rate, and they boost our workforce. Last month, CBO evaluated the economic and fiscal effects of the administration's anti-immigrant policies. CBO cut in half the projection of the annual growth rate of the U.S. population over the next 10 years. CBO now estimates that the 2035 working age population will be 2.4 million people smaller than in its previous projection. This has important fiscal costs too. CBO projects that the administration's actions to reduce immigration will increase deficits by $500 billion over 10 years, principally by reducing the number of taxpayers. Those higher deficits will make deficit reduction that much harder, adding to the damage from H.R. 1. Financing income tax tilted to the wealthy by cutting programs and raising import taxes while discouraging and disparaging immigrants is no way to fix our country's fiscal imbalances. Thank you.
Thank you all for your testimony. We'll do 5-minute rounds. Mr. Beer, is it accurate that Barack Obama deported 3 million people when he was president?
Those are total removals, not people deported from the interior.
What does that mean?
Well, there are people deported from the borders who never lived in the United States.
Were there
I mean,
people deported inside the United States?
well, I mean, I think it's a little bit unfair to compare people deported at the border versus people in the interior. I think Jessica would agree with this.
Listen. You don't want to answer a question, that's fine, but don't tell me what's fair and unfair. Bottom line, did he
think I
use
answered.
judicial warrants to deport anybody? When he deported somebody interior, did he have a judicial warrant?
No.
No. Why? Because it's stupid. Mr. Wolf, tell me what would happen if we adopted his approach. You can't deport anybody unless you have a judicial warrant. Would that be effectively the end of deportation?
I think it would. I mean, if you just look at
Don't you think that's what they want to do?
in part, absolutely.
Yeah, I
And
think these people over here want to stop deportation.
So if you just look at the 1.5 or 1.6 million individuals here with a final order of removal, right? They've been through the judicial process. They've been to an immigration judge, probably an immigration board of appeals. And every time the judge says you don't have a legal right to be here, if you had to get a judicial warrant for each one of those, you'd be here for the next 20 years trying to remove the those 1.6.
But when a Democrat says you need a judicial warrant to deport somebody, they're turning, Obama didn't do it, did he?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
No, he didn't, because it's impossible. You just stop the whole system. You're not trying to reform ICE. You're trying to stop deportations. If it were up to you, we'd have more illegal immigrants. I hope people are paying attention to what the hell's going on in this country. Sheriff, tell me about what it's like to live next to a sanctuary county.
Well, we're the only ones that actually work with ICE and are able to get people out based on our 287G. We turn them over to ICE. We arrest them for criminal violations outside of their immigration status. They come and they pick them up and they're gone. And I'll tell you, it's made a big difference. We have,
Well, those laws that you're enforcing, were they on the books before Trump became president?
yes.
So all these laws were there before Trump became president, and Obama used them. Now, when we use them, all of a sudden we're Nazis. I think people see through this. Do you believe sanctuary city policy is bad for crime, Mr. Chapman?
I do. I think, the ability, if you look at us and compare it to our next door neighbor there, I think, maybe have notified ICE maybe about 7 times. Last year, it was 184 times for us. Those are people that could have been released back to our community that could have committed other crimes, and we don't need that here. It's irresponsible of me to allow that to happen and let these people back in our community.
Ms. Vaughn, what's your takeaway about sanctuary city policy? What damage has it done to our country, if any?
Well, there's the cost of the lives lost to illegal aliens who were released by sanctuaries. That's priceless. There's the fiscal.
This case behind me, Jelani, is that his name? He should have been deported. Do you agree, Ms. Vaughn?
Absolutely, yes.
You know, you're talking about suing somebody who's been abused by the government. Why don't we sue local prosecutors who put this in motion? I'd love to do that. So I'm going to try to find a way to give victims a chance to go to court when a local prosecutor puts back on the streets somebody with 30 priors. Do you support that idea, empowering people?
I do. I think that that would be an effective deterrent to sanctuary policies because they're adopted.
Make these counties and cities pay.
Right. They're adopted for political reasons, not public safety reasons.
Yeah,
And that would
what's
have
the
their county-
upside of ignoring federal law and keeping people like this out of federal custody? It's a political choice. So let me ask you this question. There was a clerk of court, Mr. Wolf, in Kentucky that did not want to issue a marriage license to a gay couple in spite of the fact the Supreme Court said that gay marriage was legal. And she went to jail. Do you think that's a good outcome? Should she have gone to jail for refusing to obey the law?
I think it's important to obey the law.
Yeah, I do
The
too.
law is
And
the
when
law.
I suggested that the clerk of court, who had a religious view, that she could not in good conscience issue a marriage license to a gay couple, even though the law required, she needed to get out of her job. I was, boy, what a great guy I was then. Now the shoe's on the other foot. All of a sudden, that's not a good idea. What you want to do is just ignore the laws you don't like. Is that where we're headed, Mr. Wolf?
I believe it is.
Well, let's stop it now. Let's end this madness. There is no upside to sanctuary cities. It's all downside. Senator Merkley.
Well, no upside other than higher median household income, less poverty, less reliance on public assistance, lower unemployment, and safer communities, all of which seem pretty much on the upside from my point of view. Mr. Duke, what effect did the big, beautiful bill, as Trump called it, have on debt over the 10-year budget window?
CBO shows that it adds $4.7 trillion to the deficit.
That's a pretty whopping sum
It's
for
enormous.
one piece of legislation. And over 30 years?
It comes to $30 trillion
Wow.
with a T. Yeah.
What's our national debt right now?
As a share of GDP, it's around 100%.
And that's about $30 trillion. So another $30 trillion. But if interest rates are 1% higher, how much more does that add to the debt?
I can't believe I'm saying these numbers because they sound like they're from Star Trek, but $50 trillion.
Yeah, 50 trillion. Well, thanks a lot, folks, for passing a bill that's going to add $30 to $50 trillion to our national debt, suppressing our investments in healthcare, housing, education, public safety, transportation, all important things for the welfare of America. And Mr. Duke, how did that bill affect the size of the working age population?
Yeah, so basically the combination of that, so first that bill funded ICE a lot, as you showed. And CBO says that it is going to shrink the number of people who are in the workforce because they are going to leave the country or be in detention camps. That directly shrinks our tax base.
Okay, so that has an overall effect on the GDP of our nation.
Fewer working people means a smaller GDP.
Okay. Mr. Beer, in states or cities that have policies, referred to as sanctuary policies, but more accurately, that dedicate local police to doing local police work, does those locations fully cooperate in detaining somebody when there's a judicial warrant for them?
Yes, absolutely. They turn over anyone subject to a criminal matter upon notice by the federal government that they have a warrant.
So those jurisdictions have entered into the FBI federal database, fingerprints, arrest record, what that person's being detained for, how long they're being sentenced. Federal government has all that information.
Exactly, yes. So they could go and get those individuals anytime they want. And in this case in Virginia, for example, the Lake and Riley Act, which they all supported, directed the Department of Homeland Security to get those people. And instead of getting those people, they're out on the streets profiling random Hispanic workers going to their jobs. So it's a total misdirection to blame the county when the Department of Homeland Security isn't even following the law that they passed.
Why not? Since they could get that warrant and pick up those individuals who have created violent crimes.
Because the White House has created an arrest quota that's the only metric for success for them. How many arrests can you make today? And the fastest way to make arrests is indiscriminate raids, indiscriminate profiling of people on the street. That's what's led to this huge jump in the number of people and the, frankly, chaos that we're seeing in cities across the country.
So there was a chart in your longer written testimony showing that only 5% of the individuals booked by ICE have ever had a violent criminal conviction.
Yeah, and not only that, if you look at my written testimony as well, I talk about how the Department of Homeland Security has its own internal threat assessment that they assign to each individual who comes into their custody. And those people have to prioritize. They actually have a mandate. They can't be all political. They have to figure out who is actually a threat. And of those people, only 10% received the highest threat level, and 70% were deemed by the Department of Homeland Security to not be a threat at all.
So how does that match the campaign rhetoric about we're going to go after the worst of the worst, which I think 100% of Americans supported the idea that anyone who had created a violent crime should be investigated, should be prosecuted, should be, if convicted and incarcerated, should be deported. But those numbers don't match that.
Great campaign messaging, great messaging for a $200 million ad campaign by the DHS secretary, not based in reality at all. On day one of this administration, they rescinded all policies that forced ICE to focus on violent offenders and people with criminal convictions.
So they did the exact opposite of what they told the citizens they were going to do during the campaign.
It was a lie, just like it was a lie about all the things they said about Renee Good and Alex Preddy and all the other people that they've killed over the last year.
And you recommend, do I have time for a last question? My time has expired. You recommend in your testimony that there be a private right of action when individuals' civil rights are violated. Now, my understanding is that if local police or state police violate your civil rights, you have a cause of action against that. Is that correct?
Yeah, under Title 42, Section 1983, there's a private right of action against state and local, but not against the feds. And this is a critically important issue because right now they're recruiting all these state and local officers into essentially the ICE framework, which gives them immunity against all constitutional violations that they carry out while working in conjunction with the federal government. So we need to expand that to cover federal officers as well to make sure we don't have this immunity creep into every police department in America, which is their goal, including through this bill that we're talking about today.
So when the vice president said ICE agents have absolute immunity in violating people's civil rights, he was right.
Effectively, yes. Right now, as the law stands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yes.
Just one point of clarification. Is it your position that a nonviolent illegal immigrant shouldn't be deported?
My position is that we should give people who are peaceful people a path to citizenship. You endorsed that principle for many years, Senator.
So no matter how many people come?
No, it should be based on whether people have a demonstrable basis to remain in the United States, which is whether they contribute to this country or whether they're a threat to it.
I guess
we should have all law
I guess what you don't understand,
threats.
and I don't want to, I'm familiar with the Gang of Eight bill, shut down illegal immigration. We did away with the magnets. We're going to give people a chance who've been here for a long time.
Your bill had the exact opposite approach of what this Department of Homeland Security is carrying out.
Listen. For 4 years, Biden obliterated the border. 11 million people came in. And the bill I was working on would have prevented that. He took everything we were trying to do to stop illegal immigration, be fair to the ones here, and blew a hole in it, and now we got 11 million more, and you want to give them amnesty. They'll never stop. Senator Grassley.
Yeah. The United States is a country based on the rule of law, and it's against the law to enter our country without our permission. And I compliment the chairman for having this hearing and his strong statements and his strong questioning. We all know that our country benefits from legal immigration and entering our country. This is a budget committee, and my questions will basically be based upon budget impact and cost to our government. Mr. Wolf, there are some legal limitations that prevent states from completely excluding illegal immigrants from access to some of their government programs. What are those limitations and what immediate steps, considering those limitations, can the federal government take to minimize the fiscal burden of sanctuary jurisdictions?
Yeah, I think when we talk about public benefits, whether they're federal or state benefits, I think, and the chairman, I believe, mentioned this earlier, these are strong magnets of why folks decide to come to the United States illegally. Now, there's a variety of different reasons for them to do so, but if they're able to stay in a jurisdiction that shields them from law enforcement, that provides public benefits, particularly at the state level, but also at the federal level, both need to be looked at, that continues to incentivize those individuals to come and to stay. And so when you look at how to secure the country, it's not only border security, it's a big part of it, but it's also getting at these pull factors, and those public benefits are a big part of that. I think the American people are generous. I think they want to help people that need true help, but to have folks that come here to the country illegally, choose to stay illegally, have no protections under U.S. law, and continue to get public benefits, I think that's where the American people draw the line.
Ms. Vaughn, sanctuary jurisdictions frame their policy as squarely a matter of local policy, but we know these policies have both broader public safety and fiscal effects on areas beyond their border. So what are some examples of the cost to both the federal government and the state government caused by sanctuary policies that are often forgotten or overlooked, with emphasis upon forgotten or overlooked?
Well, I think too many of the victims of these policies have been forgotten. I named a few of them, but these families are still suffering silently. Another forgotten cost is the cost of providing benefits, taxpayer-funded social services to illegal alien households. And federal law currently allows states to choose to do that if their legislature approves it at enormous costs. And some of those dollars are federal dollars, so all of us as Americans share the cost burden of that arrangement, and Congress can do something about that. There's also the cost of the erosion of the integrity of our immigration system when individual states and local jurisdictions can obstruct the enforcement of federal laws that are passed by Congress without consequence. Even though many of these sanctuary policies are clearly in violation of Section 1373 and 1644 of the Immigration Act. And so, it's a slap in the face to legal immigrants to allow these policies that shield individuals from immigration enforcement, most of whom are criminal aliens. Immigrants don't want to live with these policies either. Something like 70% of the American public is opposed to sanctuary policies for all of these reasons.
Mr. Wolf, if you can answer this question, it's in regard to the 11 million people that came here under Biden and Harris. Over that period of time, did illegal immigrants seek out sanctuary jurisdictions for safe harbor? And is there any evidence to back up your statement?
Well, I think if you look historically at where illegal aliens reside, now they reside all across the United States, but if you were to do a heat map, you would see them, the majority of them, in places like New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, and others that have these sanctuary jurisdictions. So yes, I do believe over time that illegal aliens do tend to go to these types of jurisdictions.
I got 6 seconds left. Sheriff Chapman, what are some examples of state and local cost increases those jurisdictions incur?
Well, I look at the funding that goes to our state and local, the folks that surround us, and folks that do not support, the immigration policies here, and the funding that they get. And I think if that was curtailed, maybe they might look at this a lot more seriously. But it is a cost to us. It's a cost of putting people out there. You're talking about more homicides. What you're talking about, we've had our share locally here, and certainly as the chairman brought up, and we've had them in Loudoun County. And it's a human factor that is really important here. We want to keep our people safe and keep them alive.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman.
Holland, I apologize.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wolf, if I could start with you. You would agree that in America, people have the right to peacefully protest under the First Amendment, right?
Correct.
You would agree that people have the constitutional right to due process, right?
Correct.
Would you agree with Kristi Noem, who characterized Renee Good as a domestic terrorist? Is Renee Good a domestic terrorist in your view?
I've been very clear on this point when that incident occurred, as well as the Preddy incident as well, is to let that investigation play out before any comments are made about the motives of any of the individuals involved, including the law enforcement officers.
So clearly it was wrong to label them domestic terrorists, right?
Again, I'm not at the department. I don't know what the information she had. If you're asking me my opinion, I would have waited till the investigation play out before I rendered any decision.
So you think it's still an open question as to whether or not they're domestic terrorists?
Again, I'm going to let the investigation
It sounds like
play
you
out.
do, which I think, the country has seen the videos, okay? So I find it outrageous that you would sit here today and hold open the idea that they were domestic terrorists. Their parents and their loved ones deserve an apology from the U.S. government, and I found it outrageous that you're taking the position that you are
I'm
here
not taking
today.
that position.
Yes, you are. By taking no position and leaving on the table the notion that they're domestic terrorists, you are taking a position. Mr. Beer, thank you for emphasizing the big lie, that what the Trump administration is doing is going after the worst of the worst. As Senator Merkley pointed out, and as you've shown, that's just not true. I mean, nobody wants people who are here illegally committing violent crimes. But the overwhelming majority of people who are in detention right now, by ICE's own admission, pose no risk to public safety. Is that right?
That's right. Over 70% were given no threat level at all. They could be released right now without a threat to the public.
Yeah. So this is just such a big lie. I mean, that's what we're seeing playing out in this forum and out of the White House from people like Stephen Miller and the President of the United States. Could you talk about another big lie? We do know that the so-called big beautiful bill, as Republicans called it, increased the debt massively, like over $4 trillion, right? They gave tax cuts to billionaires permanently. They cut health programs. They cut food safety, food programs. They had a walloping increase for ICE, like 7 times its regular budget. And at the same time, we hear people like Stevie Miller and others claiming that it's actually immigrants who are the cause of increasing our deficits and debt. In fact, they've said that immigration is the cause of the growing national debt, and immigrants take more from the country than they contribute. Now, Mr. Beer, you've looked at this question very closely. Could you just respond to what I think is the second big lie?
Yeah, over the last 30 years, we looked at all the government budgets, federal, state, and local combined. Immigrants reduced deficits by $14.5 trillion, which is about a third of all of the total deficits during that period of time. And it's easy to understand why, because they work at 12 percentage points higher than the national average. They use less benefits because they're subject to constraints, unique barriers to applying for those benefits, in particular Social Security and Medicare, where those are by far our largest programs, and they're not eligible for those at all if they're here in the country illegally, or if they came legally and they don't have a sufficient work history to qualify. So you have clear reasons for believing that they are reducing the deficits and debt. They are a benefit to this country, and we need more people who are going to contribute in the future as our population ages.
Could you amplify a little more on the issue of Medicare and Social Security? Because those, trust funds in just a couple years, there won't, be enough to pay out full on the dollar for Social Security and Medicare.
That's
As
right.
you pointed out, there are many immigrants that are paying in to that, but not paying out. So could you just elaborate on that?
According to the Social Security Administration, we need about 35 million more workers in order to keep revenues equal to expenses by the middle of the 2030s. So we are at a position right now where immigration is not going to solve it. Obviously, it's not going to solve it, but it is moving us in the right direction. These are people who are showing up. They're ready to work. They're often prime age individuals who are ready to enter the labor force. So it's a huge benefit fiscally to the United States to have these people who want to contribute to our country.
Thank you. And thank you for exposing two of the big lies coming out of the Trump administration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The information we have is that 64% of the people encountered bys are either convicted or pending criminal charges. So if somebody's wrong, we'll find out who's lying.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, let's talk about some realities here. The ranking member talked about the funding for ICE rose dramatically this first year of the Trump administration. Well, this is why. Because for the previous 4 years, President Biden and the Democrats opened up the border. Now, I like this chart. First of all, save the president's life. But the other reason I like this chart is it shows cause and effect. And the catalyst for this explosion in illegal immigration really was deferred action on childhood arrival. That's what sparked this. That created the first incentive for people to come to this country illegally. That started the first wave. Now, back in 2014, these were massive numbers. I remember President Obama calling 2,000 a day was, a humanitarian crisis. I think under Biden, we had over 14,000 a day average. So, Mr. Wolf, you were acting secretary trying to clean up the Obama mess. I remember leading a delegation down to McAllen, Texas during the Obama administration where we looked at the facility they set up, and everybody, Democrat, Republican, were singing the praises of DHS for kind of skirting the rules and establishing a facility that would keep the children safe as they were being encountered and detained across the border because of the incentive of DACA. A couple years later, in the Trump administration, that exact same facility, all of a sudden now the Democrats are calling that kids in cages. I mean, first of all, will you just confirm the fact that that was the exact same facility that we praised in 2014, and all of a sudden, 2017, those are kids in cages?
That's correct. Those were Border Patrol facilities.
I think out of your department, last year we got a memo that said of the millions, and nobody knows exactly how many millions came in here, the wide open border. I mean, it's so out of whack. 650,000 people that are at large in America have committed crimes. 15,000 murderers, 20,000 rapists. Ms. Spear, you're shaking your head.
They're not at large. The murderers are in prison. They're in prison where they should be.
They're not detained.
Yes,
Again,
they're detained by the state. They're not detained by ICE. They're in prisons ready to be deported. Now, I don't...
Ms. Vaughn, have you kept track of how many people have been murdered, raped, victims of vehicular homicide at the hands of somebody that the Biden administration led in this country?
I wish there were a way to do that, but so many law enforcement agencies do not keep track of the immigration status of people in their custody. They don't want to know.
Would you say it's in the hundreds?
Yes.
Thousands?
Yes.
Tens of thousands?
One data point that I do know is that at a certain point a few years ago, ICE determined that there were 10,000 deportable criminal aliens who were released by sanctuary policies who subsequently reoffended within 18 months.
So where is the outrage on the other side of the aisle to those victims and their families? We had a hearing and in Homeland Security, and they were talking about the trained activists. The number was very large, but I couldn't believe it. Trained activists that are trained to basically interfere and obstruct with the legal law enforcement actions. And I made the comment, I can't imagine encouraging my supporters, first of all, to get trained to obstruct justice, much less then go ahead and do it, put yourself in harm's way, knowing people are going to potentially get hurt. Well, people did get hurt. Three people lost their lives. And now the other side exploits those martyrs while they completely ignore the thousands, and let's face it, it's thousands of the Lake and Rileys and those individuals. Where's the outrage to the crimes committed by that massive wave? And of course, I didn't want to have to spend money on ICE. But what are you going to do? And trying to clean up this mess, I mean, it's difficult enough for you to clean up Obama's mess. Try and clean up Biden's mess. And rather than getting help from the other side, no, they trained activists to obstruct trying to clean up that mess. That's the reality of the situation. That's why I agree, and I appreciate this hearing. We have to end sanctuary cities because it's just another incentive, a massive incentive for more illegal immigration. And the next time Democrats get in power, they'll open it up again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me first observe for my colleagues here that sanctuary city is a political term. It's not a technical term, as your own witness has acknowledged. And it's important to get things right. So I want to just describe what's happening in Rhode Island. In Rhode Island, our federal district court has decided that local and state police officers can be held liable if they hold a person under an ICE detainer without a proper warrant, that the warrant requirement actually applies. And particularly when you're dealing with someone's freedom, detention. And that decision is not a fluke. It has been upheld by the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit. So in my state, the District of Rhode Island from a federal point of view, and in my circuit, the United States Circuit Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, it is binding law that state and local officials who hold somebody under an ICE detainer where ICE hasn't bothered to get a warrant can be held civilly liable. So we need to face that fact because that's actually binding federal law. The second comment I want to make is about the behavior of ICE agents when they operate in Rhode Island. Those of you on the Judiciary Committee will remember me describing this set of affairs to then Secretary Noem. So masked agents appear in the Rhode Island Superior Court courthouse. They are operating in violation of an agreement that they have with the court not to operate in that courthouse. They are operating with cameras in violation of a courthouse rule that forbids taking photographs. They are pursuing a 30-plus-year-old individual whom they have mixed up with a high school intern who is interning for one of our state court judges. The state court judge is going to take the intern back to high school, so they walk out to the judge's car. If the ICE agents hadn't bothered to figure out who the judges were in the courthouse, when they got to the car, parked in a judges-only spot, they had the information necessary to deduce that this might be a judge. But rather than accept the judge's representations that he was returning an intern to the high school, I'll take out the full F-bomb because they used the actual full word. They told the judge, we're going to smash your effing windows and we're going to drag you out of your effing car if you don't turn over this intern to us. And then they grabbed the intern and they took him into another car for half an hour and figured out that the high school intern was not the 30-plus-year-old person they purported to be looking for. Why would regular law enforcement, why would those sheriffs in the courthouse want to cooperate with an agency whose law enforcement behavior is so wildly irresponsible and unprofessional? It's hard to imagine. And when I asked Secretary Noem about the problem of deconfliction, I think pretty much everybody in law enforcement understands what deconfliction is. Even if the state police aren't cooperating with the Bristol police,
when they run in to do a raid in Bristol, they will let the Bristol police know that they're going to do a raid so that when calls come in about cars in the street or people with guns or whatever, the local police department know what's going on. Deconfliction is elementary stuff that is taught to law enforcement. And yet, ICE refuses to deconflict. And the secretary didn't know the difference between deconfliction and cooperation. So clearly there's a massive hole in the way in which DHS thinks about this stuff. And it is in that environment that I think a lot of sensible decisions are being made by local police chiefs about whether they want to cooperate with an organization that behaves in unreasonable and unprofessional ways, that threatens judges with violence, and that refuses to even give them the courtesy of deconflicting when they're operating in their jurisdiction. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cornett.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think President Trump has done it again, exercising almost magical powers, turning Democrats into budget hawks. It's an amazing thing to behold. And of course, they reflexively oppose anything and everything that he proposes, whether it's standing to honor law enforcement and public safety and not illegal immigrants, whether it's eliminating the threat of nuclear weapons and the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. They take the side of the state sponsor of terrorism. It's just amazing to me to behold. Sheriff, I was struck by the ranking member's introduction to his comments. He said, let the police be the police. And I assume that would extend to other law enforcement officers like you and the sheriffs and other folks who maintain public safety. But is the collective role and job of law enforcement officers like yourself to protect public safety?
It is, and I think we all need to work together. One of the things that was just left out of the testimony just provided is the fact that communication is important to this, and we work very well with our counterparts, and a lot of times it's because of the chiefs are driven by the politicians above them that don't allow them to actually work properly and cooperatively with our federal and other local counterparts. When you have that level of communication, you can work these issues out in advance before you have a problem like what the senator was just saying.
Well, a lot of it boils down to information sharing, correct?
That's correct.
And even where in the Senator Whitehouse's circuit, the judges said that maybe local law enforcement can't keep people beyond their jail sentence without some other additional warrant. Let me ask you to go out on a limb here a little bit. If the two individuals who tragically died in Minneapolis who interfered with law enforcement operation by ICE, if there had been the kind of cooperation that you demonstrate in Loudoun County and the sort of cooperation that you've advocated for here, do you think it's more likely than not that those two individuals will still be alive?
Well, I can't really speak directly to that. What I can tell you is that the cooperation that we've had actually works well, and I do believe that that would have had an impact there. When you're talking about 287G and against Senator Whitehouse's information, we have an agreement with ICE, and our people are trained in order to hold on to people for a little bit up to 48 hours after they're incarcerated for a completely separate offense with us, okay?
That's a memorandum of understanding between the feds and local.
That's right, and that way they're already in custody. All we got to do is turn them over. So they don't have to come to the community to do, very often, to do any enforcement operations. So it actually works out well, and to get on the front side of this and to have that level of communication prevents that kind of thing. But if you have politicians that are directing you to act in a particular way, it really, really messes up the system here. And I think that's largely the problem. We all want to work together. We work with everybody, all of our federal counterparts, all of our state and local counterparts, which I believe is one of the reasons we got one of the lowest crime rates in the entire country.
And you haven't, as a result of that cooperation, you haven't experienced any of the tragic consequences that we saw in Minneapolis?
That we've actually had, before that, we actually had people that had not been arrested by us that committed crimes, but anybody that's been arrested by us and turned over to ICE is not a problem. They're out of our hands.
And Mr. Wolf, you were, of course, former Secretary of Homeland Security, and our Democratic colleagues say that they won't fund the Department of Homeland Security and alleviate these long waiting periods that citizens are experiencing at airports all around the country. They won't fund FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, until federal warrants are required. Now, will you explain how a final order of deportation is a civil matter, and that requiring, after that due process has already been exhausted, why requiring a criminal warrant would be not only unnecessary, but also destructive of ICE's ability to actually enforce immigration law?
Absolutely. An alien will go before an immigration judge towards the end of their dependency of their hearing. They will go before an immigration judge and they will rule on their case. If they want to appeal that, they'll go to the Immigration Board of Appeals, and they could perhaps even appeal that outside of that. And in every case, a judge, through the due process, they'll have an attorney with them, through the due process, says you don't have a legal right to remain in the United States, and it's time for you to self-deport. It's time for you to leave. And we know, as I indicated earlier, about 1.6 million of those individuals have said, no, I'm going to defy that order. I'm going to stay here in the United States. I don't want to go back to my home country. And then ICE is coming in at the very end of this process, enforcement removal officers, to effectuate that judge's order, to understand and to remove that individual from the country. And in some cases, they are in their house. And so they have a final order of removal. They have reasonable suspicion that that individual is in that house. They have likely observed that individual go in and out of that house, and they are there to remove that individual. It's very different than a judicial warrant where you're just going in to arrest someone who's then going into the due process system, has to go before a judge, have their case heard, all the facts. That is not what is occurring when you have a final order of removal.
Thank you.
Senator Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everyone, thank you all for being here today. And I just want to begin by reminding everyone this is the first hearing of the Budget Committee in this Congress. This is the first one, 13 months into this Congress. Oh, you're saying second, sir? I appreciate that, Chairman. Second. Look, when we talk about what's happening to constituents across the country right now, you think there'd be some hearings about the high cost of everything. Their detainers, 287. I certainly hope we get to that place. But since we're here today, and we're not talking about the high cost of groceries or how expensive it is to get a birthday cake for your kids, gas prices through the roof, housing unaffordable. My Republican colleagues want to have a conversation about the one big, beautiful bill that they passed, which, by the way, we've now learned from the Congressional Budget Office that the legislation increased the federal deficit by $3.4 trillion. Trillion. It's a lot of money. While failing to provide real relief to middle and low-income families. So, look, the proposals tied to the package and its broader agenda included cuts to programs like food, like SNAP, providing support to millions of working families just to put food on the table. So as we sit here in the Senate Budget Committee, yes or no, and my question is to Mr. Duke, does focusing federal attention on punishing so-called sanctuary cities meaningfully address the affordability crisis Americans are facing?
No.
Does it lower health costs for childhood diabetes?
No.
Does it make the gas that people put at a gas station into their vehicles more affordable to get to work, or does it make it more expensive?
It has nothing to do with gas.
Does it help a single mom afford to put food on the table?
No.
Does it address the medical solvency issues to make sure seniors can count on their benefits?
It addresses them by making them worse.
Does it help a young couple who wants to buy a home and start a family, maybe afford that house?
It does not help.
Well, what the hearing discusses does not include anything that I just asked about. And the constituents I've been talking to at home are saying, when's Congress going to get off their rears and do something about the prices that we're hitting every day, as opposed to just protecting the Epstein class and not demanding that these documents and everything else get released. So, Mr. Wolf, you had responsibilities in a few of these places, and I appreciate the responses you were providing to one of my colleagues now about the process that you believe is fair, that allows ICE agents to go into someone's house without a judicial warrant. It's hard for me to continue to listen to justification on how American citizens can have their homes broken into without a judicial warrant. I don't understand this. That American citizens, it's okay for an American citizen to have their windows on their car bashed in. That's not okay. And with all these conversations about AI and some of these companies now that are working with ICE for facial recognition, which I have concerns about, what I don't understand now is how the Department of Homeland Security has access to the best facial recognition AI. DHS says they know who the violent criminals are. Their words, they say they know who they are. And if they only had access to facial recognition, they could go find all the violent criminals. Well, why aren't they doing it? It's one unanswered question after another. It's one American right after another that is being torn apart. And there's justification now to say we can pound in your door, we can go in your house if you're an American citizen, or we can bust out your windows and drag your butt out of a car as an American citizen. I just don't get it, Mr. Chairman. And I hope we have some hearings about getting answers to that, because I think there's agreement between Democrats and Republicans on this issue. We don't want American citizens being treated this way. None of us. We want to go after the violent criminals. We both agree with this. I certainly hope that we can have a thorough and thoughtful hearing and get some answers to that as well, and that everyone agrees, stop doing that. Mr. President, tell your folks to stop doing that. I hope now that Senator Mullins, who's going to be Secretary of Health or Homeland Security, maybe he'll get these people to stop all the bad shit and to go after the bad people. Then we'll be in a better place. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll have a hearing on affordability. Ms. Vaughn, what percentage of illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities or just in general receive federal benefits?
I don't have numbers for specific sanctuary jurisdictions,
just in general.
Nationally, it's more than 60%.
So more than
of households,
60%
yes.
of illegal immigrants receive federal benefits, and it has absolutely no budget impact. Well, that's interesting. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. Thanks to each of you for being here. I want to say at the outset a couple of things. First, I'm not familiar with many countries that are asked to simply ignore their own immigration laws, separate and apart from their criminal laws, just their own immigration laws. And those countries that do exist or may have existed over time don't remain countries very long, because things happen when you don't enforce your own immigration laws. We don't have to travel very far in our own continent or throughout Europe or Asia or Africa to see what would happen if one of us entered one of those countries, took up residence there unlawfully. It likely wouldn't end well for us. I also want to observe that there's been several mention here today about the difference between state authority and federal authority, a reference to states' rights. I don't like using the term states' rights, not only because it conjures George Wallace's image, also because it's inappropriate. States don't have rights. Individuals have rights. States have authority. That's the inverse polar opposite of a right. We have parallel authority with parallel sovereign jurisdictions in this country. The U.S. government, the one headquartered in this city where we sit today, has authority over our immigration laws, laws governing naturalization, who may enter the country, who may stay under what terms and conditions or for what period of time. We do need our federal government to be able to undertake those efforts, to perform those efforts well. We've adopted a number of techniques to procure and encourage the cooperation of state and local jurisdictions. Sometimes those have been ignored, and that is unfortunate. I'll get more to that in a moment. But look, we're exploring something today that is not without cost. The cost of an unsecured border, and unprecedented illegal immigration during the 4 years of the Biden administration remain both stunning and debilitating. The Trump administration, for its part, quite fortunately, has done a very effective job at securing the border and beginning the process of deportations on a very large scale. But there's a lot of work left to be done to deport the many millions who remain in this country for us to be able to restore law and order. People who, if they did immigrated to almost any other country on earth, would be in a whole lot of trouble and would be facing those things, and yet we're made to feel as if we would be doing the wrong thing by enforcing our immigration laws as such. That important work that's being done, carried out every day by brave men and women in federal law enforcement, continues to be obstructed across the country as radical leftists who are proudly, aggressively supporting sanctuary cities try to undermine the enforcement of federal law. These Democrat-controlled state and local governments have, in many instances, been working actively, aggressively, through these sanctuary city policies to subvert not just federal law, but the enforcement of federal law by duly sworn and authorized federal law enforcement officials. They are trying to do one thing by enforcing the law, which is to prioritize the well-being of American citizens and the safety of the American homeland. This terrible reality that we face is highly offensive to the citizens of the United States, especially those who have done the work to immigrate to this country legally and to do it the right way. Now, believe it or not, not that long ago, Democrats supported, and President Clinton himself signed into law, the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, commonly known as IRIRA. That act expanded border enforcement capabilities and helped bring immigration under control at a time when illegal immigration to the United States was far less frequent, far less of a large problem than it has been in recent years. In 2016, President Trump ran for president and was elected on a promise to stop illegal immigration. Democrats intending to oppose the president at every turn decided to depart in that moment from their previous, more common sense position and to go all in on the belief that our nation should effectively have no border at all, that borders are sort of aspirational suggestions that we can look the other way on. That brings us to the topic of today's hearing, the cost of sanctuary cities. So what is that cost? Well, the cost is clear. It is waste, fraud, and abuse by illegal aliens who shouldn't be within our borders. We saw this in Minnesota, and we've seen it elsewhere. The cost is clear. More than anything else, it's the loss of human life, innocent human life, innocent American lives at the hands of illegal aliens who have perpetrated some of the most heinous attacks on innocent American lives in recent memory. And these are entirely preventable, entirely avoidable crimes, crimes that would not have happened but for our open border policies facilitated by sanctuary cities. The cost is clear. It's also the increased additional avoidable tax burden on state, local, and federal taxpayers who are expected to subsidize and, in fact, are forced to subsidize problematic social welfare programs that illegal aliens have obtained eligibility for through fraudulent means or various loopholes. To say nothing of the education system, which, because of a Supreme Court ruling in Plyler v. Doe 4.5 decades ago, states are also forced, by no choice of their own, to supply that additional benefit as well. So look, the cost is clear. It's all over the place. We can't ignore it. And by continuing to ignore it, we create additional problems. Let's not dress this up as something that it is not and never can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo the sentiment that several of my colleagues have mentioned earlier in this hearing in more than just being surprised that this is, well, I guess the second hearing for this Congress, but the first of this calendar year. It is not about the federal budget, not about an economic outlook, but I understand why the Republican majority wouldn't want to talk about that. Not while gas prices are spiking because of an unauthorized war against Iran. Instead, we're here to discuss how off-base this whole sanctuary conversation really is. Now, I know it's area of passion for the chairman. We've debated sanctuary policies on the floor of the Senate, as I've objected to the legislation he has presented that would promote federal overreach, in my opinion. I think part of my frustration comes from the fact that there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what sanctuary policies are and what sanctuary policies are not. Sanctuary policies do not mean that there are no laws in sanctuary cities or states. They do not keep ICE and other federal agencies from entering a city or a state to arrest violent criminals as they're released from prison. Sanctuary policies simply affirm that immigration enforcement is the job of the federal government, and that the federal government cannot unilaterally decide to co-opt state and local authorities or their resources, precious resources, in carrying out these responsibilities. True, there's some states and local jurisdictions who may choose to coordinate, collaborate, but there's many who don't for their justifiable reasons. It means carrying out immigration enforcement activities is ICE's purview, while respecting state and local law enforcement agencies to make their own decisions about how to focus and direct their limited resources that they deem best protects and serves their constituents. It means prohibiting federal overreach through policies that have been upheld by the courts. And so I'm glad several of my Republican colleagues are here to listen to me quote Justice Scalia in the case Prince versus United States. Quote, "The federal government may neither issue directives, require the states to address particular problems, nor command the state's officers or those of their political subdivisions to administer or enforce a federal regulatory program." End quote. Look, folks, we can have disagreements on policy, but the fundamental misunderstanding about what sanctuary policies are has led to the promotion of enforcement actions across the country that have become damaging to our communities and to our local economies. So it seems to me that this debate has not really been about public safety. Because if it were, we could also be talking about how the data shows that sanctuary policies actually make communities safer, healthier, and more prosperous. That's right. The evidence shows, the research shows sanctuary jurisdictions have lower crime rates, higher median household income, less poverty, less reliance on public assistance, higher labor force participation, and lower unemployment. That's right. Seems like sanctuary cities are helping to make America great. I said it. So let's stop perpetuating the lies. Let's ensure that ICE and CBP agents are accountable and conduct their jobs in accordance with the law and the Constitution. Let's allow local law enforcement leaders to do what they deem is best for public safety. And Mr. Chairman, just so you know, I'm not exaggerating in my claims here. I'd like to submit for the record articles and reports from researchers at the University of Texas, Austin, from the Center for American Progress, from the University of Arizona, University of North Carolina, and the American Immigration Council.
No objection.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy.
Secretary Wolf, thank you for your service. Why, in your opinion, do so many, not all, but so many of my Democratic colleagues believe in open borders?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's a couple of different fronts. One, it would be they don't believe in immigration law. They don't like enforcement. They don't like removing of individuals. And they believe that there are some that believe that anyone and everyone should be able to come to the U.S., whether they apply for protections under U.S. law or not. And then there's some probably that would like to see more voters in the U.S. as well.
Ms. Vaughn, some of my colleagues, for whom I have great respect, believe that the 10th Amendment allows local governments to ignore federal immigration law and implement sanctuary policy. The Supreme Court has ruled that racial quotas represent a pernicious form of racial discrimination. Can local governments ignore that ruling under the 10th Amendment?
Well, the 10th Amendment is about.
Just answer my question, please, ma'am.
The 10th Amendment is about commandeering, and so it's not really appropriate to this because.
Is the answer yes or no, ma'am?
Could you ask me again? Because I don't understand the relevance to, I'm sorry, I don't, because ICE is not asking them
Secretary Wolf,
to do
you
that.
heard my question. Under the guise of the 10th Amendment, can local governments ignore a Supreme Court ruling?
I don't believe they can.
Okay. Women have the right to vote in America by statute
Yes.
and by constitutional interpretation. Under the guise of the 10th Amendment, can local governments just ignore that and prohibit women from voting?
No.
Okay. Mr. Duke, you worked for President Biden and Vice President Harris, didn't you?
Yes.
And I listened carefully to your testimony today. You expressed, well, you offered the opinion that the One Big Beautiful Bill is terrible in part because it will cause deficits. Is that right?
Yes.
Isn't it a fact that the profligacy of President Biden caused 9% inflation in America?
No.
Okay. Isn't it a fact that if President Biden had discovered life on Mars when he was president, he would have immediately sent it money?
I don't believe so.
Oh, you don't? Okay. Well, I appreciate your newly found fiscal conservatism. Mr. Beer, you seem to be a very smart guy, and you seem to be a nice enough guy.
Thank you, Senator. You seem smart as well.
Jack.
Don't
That was the chairman, not me.
Don't you think your hyperbolic statements undermine your credibility?
What hyperbolic statement did I make?
On February the 11th, 2026, you posted on Bluesky, quote, my words, or your words, not mine. The Democrats' video telling service members to ignore illegal orders didn't go far enough. They should have also urged them to refuse unethical orders, whether illegal or not. There are many things deemed legal that are still obviously unethical, and everyone should hold themselves to this higher law, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
I believe you did. Do you disagree with it? You think people should do unethical things in their capacity
on December the 31st of 2025, you posted to in front of God.
But wait.
In
Do
front
you,
of,
do you
in
disagree
front
with
of,
what
let
I
me
said?
finish my question.
I'm
You
sorry.
answer it, sir.
Sure.
In front of God and country, you said, quote, they, referring to Republicans, think they can troll their way into us accepting ethnic cleansing, end quote. Your words, not mine. Did I read that correctly?
That was in regard to a
Did I
Department of
read that?
Homeland
Did I
Security
read
post
that?
about advocating 100 million deportations. That is what DHS has tweeted from their own account. 100 million deportations
hurts, doesn't
would be ethnic cleansing. You would be
Truth hurts,
removing
doesn't it?
1/3 of the country. So yes, there
Truth
are
can
people
just
within the
gut you like
Department
a
of
fish.
Homeland
And
Security.
you don't think this is hyperbolic? Give me 30 more seconds.
I think advocating 100 million deportations is
I'm having fun here, Mr.
ethnic
Chairman.
cleansing.
On February
Yes.
5th, you quoted you said the following on Bluesky.
Your time's
Quote,
up.
these are all good, but there's no enforcement mechanism. I'm sorry. Let me try a better one. On March 2nd, you said, quote, if you rule against Trump's population purge agenda, no hyperbole there, the nativists will name you, threaten you, and come after you. These judges are much braver than the ICE agents who hide behind masks while violating the Constitution.
They are
Close
much braver.
quote.
They put their names on their rulings and they stand behind their constitutional rulings. When I talk about population purge, I'm talking about the fact that they're trying to deport U.S.-born citizens, people born here. They are trying to deport them as well. So it's not a mass deportation agenda. It is also an agenda intended to reduce the population of the United States, including U.S.-born people.
Thank
so
you.
these are not
Wait.
hyperbolic statements. I appreciate you reading
Thank
my
you.
account. I appreciate
Here's
your
the good
research.
news.
What planet
Wait,
did you
wait,
just,
wait,
wait a minute, Mr. Chairman, what
wait.
planet did you just parachute in
No,
from?
no. Hey, guys.
You trigger my gag reflex, Mr. Beaver.
We got a process here, and it's good to know you don't have an agenda. Senator King.
Mr. Chair, thanks for doing this. And Sheriff, welcome. I've got a Virginian at the table. That's why I wanted to come. My sheriff in his testimony said, it is important to distinguish criminal aliens who pose a threat to our community from immigrants here legally. All of us agree with that. We should try to find that balance. I don't think we're balanced right now. I've been here 13 years. I wish we'd have a hearing about the positive impact immigrants make on the United States. We've never had that hearing in this committee or the HELP committee or any others. When we have hearings, it's about immigrants doing bad things rather than about the
Well, y'all were in
positives that
charge. Why
immigrants
didn't
do.
you have them?
Well, can I take my time? Can I take my time? Because I think what happens, I think what happens when
Get a whole minute
the
more.
only hearings about immigrants are about crime, and we have a president who calls people's countries shithole countries. I got a lot of immigrants in the United States and in Virginia who feel like they're being targeted. And let's talk about positives. And I'm going to use Loudoun as an example. The sheriff is rightly proud of Loudoun County. 420,000 people in the last census. It's probably coming up to 450 now. It is not only one of the safest jurisdictions in the United States, it's also, by recent count, the wealthiest county in the United States. And guess what? 25% of the population and climbing is immigrant. 25%. Safe, economically successful, immigrant. And I also applaud this sheriff's department. If you have something to do, or if you don't have something to do on Halloween sometime, go to the Halloween parade in Leesburg, and you'll see the sheriff's deputies helping order. And they all wear uniforms with their names on them. None of them wear masks. The county's been an innovator in body camera use. Wow, what a novel concept. I like the professionalism that I see with your sheriff's department, and I think we could use it at the federal level. Here's an issue about sanctuary cities in the Trump administration. DHS, Mr. Chair, you might like this one. DHS in May put out a list of sanctuary cities, and they included 34 Virginia communities, cities and counties on that list. It provoked laughter in Virginia. There were cities that were not cities but counties. There were counties that were not counties but cities. There were jurisdictions that have virtually no immigrants whatsoever listed as sanctuary communities. Here was my favorite. The city of Duffield, Virginia. Now, if you don't know where Duffield is, you're not alone. Scott County, deep in Appalachia, 0.6 square miles, 76 people, not a single immigrant, not even a police department, sanctuary city. Virginia laughed the DHS out of the office. And so in October, this was in May. In August, DOJ came back and did a new list, number of sanctuary cities in Virginia, 0. They redid the list in October, number of sanctuary cities in Virginia, 0. Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce DHS's bogus sanctuary cities list as, into the record.
Without objection.
And then, Mr. Chair, my last question is, look, I'm not on judiciary, and the bill that you have about imposing liability on local officials would suggest that the only fault in this area lies on local officials. Now, if you have a markup, it'll be in judiciary, and I'm not on it, but my question is sort of for you. Isn't what's good for the goose good for the gander? What about all the times when I was governor of Virginia, 2006, 2010, and my DOC, Department of Corrections, or local law enforcement told ICE and the federal immigration agencies 3 years under President Bush, 1 year under President Obama, that, hey, we've got somebody here who is not lawfully here. Please come pick them up. And ICE didn't show up. And ICE still is not showing up. So often, the bad examples, including one of the ones in Fairfax recently, repeated instances of ICE having this person in their purview, in their grasp, and then letting him go. So wouldn't it be, I mean, if you're going to do a bill and blame cities for this and try to impose liability on their local taxpayers, what about letting people sue ICE when hardworking local officials and sheriffs let folks know, hey, we got folks here that are here unlawfully, come pick them up. And when they don't come pick them up, shouldn't they be liable for that?
Yeah, maybe that's something we could do together. Sounds like a pretty good idea to me. Be glad to work with you.
Well,
I think those days are probably over with this administration, but the idea that the federal government had notice and the local community is willing to turn them over and they turned a blind eye and somebody got hurt, I would be willing definitely to create liability there.
And I'll just conclude, Mr. Chair, and say, the mayor in me, the governor in me, gets mad when things like this get blamed on mayors and governors when often it's complete dysfunction at the federal level under multiple administrations. That's the real culprit. I yield back.
Right. The lawyer in me wants to hold people accountable who create problems. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for holding this important hearing. The United States is a nation of law and order. Those two things go hand in hand because when you have laws that are obeyed, you have order in your communities. But for too long, liberal states and cities have decided to simply ignore the federal laws they don't agree with. When I was the governor of Florida, I didn't have to worry about our sheriffs not enforcing the law because President Trump and our federal law enforcement have to worry about that every day. The American people voted very clearly to secure the border. That's what the election was about, and stop illegal immigration. We're a country of legal immigration, not illegal immigration. And without a single new law being enacted, President Trump has delivered and secured the border when President Biden said he couldn't do it. President Trump and the heroic men and women of our ICE and Border Patrol are enforcing our laws, and they're securing our nation, and the crime rate is down. But some Americans say, no, we won't follow federal law. We want to be a sanctuary for people who broke the law to enter our country illegally. It is a violation. It's against the law to come into our country illegally, like most countries. It's dangerous, it's costly to the American taxpayer, and has horrific consequences. That's why I and my colleague on this committee, Senator Moreno, have introduced two bills to curb this kind of dangerous disregard for the law. Our Unifying American Security Interests Act and Sanctuary Jurisdiction Event Security Enhancement Act, which stop DHS funding grants and financial assistance from going to cities and jurisdictions that refuse to support our ICE and DHS agents in their efforts to keep our streets safe. Americans clearly don't want their tax dollars used for handouts to illegal aliens for health care or food stamps while we have American citizens here at home who are going without. And that's the exact kind of waste and financial mismanagement that these bills will stop. But that's just the financial cost. Let's talk about the human cost. Laken Riley, a nursing student, 22 years old, in Georgia, was beaten with a rock and strangled by a Venezuelan illegal alien who had been caught at the border and released under Biden's open borders rules. Rachel Marin, 37, of Maryland, mother of 5, who was raped and murdered while hiking by a Salvadoran criminal alien who crossed our border illegally, not once, not twice, but 3 times under Biden. Kate Sinley, 32, died in her father's arms on a San Francisco pier after being shot by a 5-time Mexican deportee who was allowed to roam freely because the city's sanctuary policy led local officials to ignore an ICE detainer. These are just a few of the many lives cut short and the potential unrealized lives because of Biden's open borders that allowed dangerous people to come into this country and the sanctuary cities that chose to support and encourage these criminals. I'm from Florida. We are an immigration state, legal immigration. We don't support illegal immigration. Sheriff Chapman, my question, how can open borders and lax immigration policies like a sanctuary cities be considered humane by Democrats if they fail to protect the very citizens Democrats and other elected officials are meant to serve, and they're under an oath of office to serve.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, the most important thing is for us to keep safety, keep our people safe, and we've got to do everything in our power, and that includes working with everybody. And I make that point all the time to my constituents, say, look, we want to work with all of our federal counterparts. We all have different missions here, different cogs in the wheel, but we all have to work together to keep everybody safe.
Is it better for you if you turn a criminal over to ICE rather than let them back into the community?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mr. Wolf, in sanctuary cities, local authorities can decline ICE detainers, which means that criminals are released back in the community rather than transferred safely into ICE custody. This creates opportunities for illegal fugitives to relocate or reoffend, like in the tragic murder of Kate Steinle. It also forces DHS officers to go into neighborhoods to root out violent criminals. Not only does this cost the taxpayer more, it also increases the risk for everyone involved, including bystanders, DHS officers, and potential future victims. How do these policies prioritize offenders over American victims by obstructing deportations?
Well, when ICE is required to go into a community out on the streets, right, instead of going into that jail setting and picking up that criminal illegal alien, it'll take 1 or 2 officers to go into a jail setting. If they have to go into their neighborhood, it's going to take 15 to 20 officers to apprehend that same individual. You're putting not only officers at risk, you're putting that alien at risk, and you're putting others in that community at risk. So the idea here, and it's an ironic kind of play here, is that individuals and politicians that want less ICE in their jurisdictions, they will give them sanctuary policies to say, we want ICE out. But in fact, it just requires them to be more in their communities because they won't go into a jail setting. They have to go into their neighborhoods. They have to continue to enforce immigration law. So if your idea is, I want to see less ICE in my community, I don't like immigration enforcement, let them into your jail. Let them pick up those criminal illegal aliens. Otherwise, they're going to be out on your streets because they have to continue to enforce immigration law. And of course, it's better with local law enforcement support and cooperation. But again, in many jurisdictions, sanctuary jurisdictions, we don't see that either.
Thank you, Chairman.
Senator Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question for all of you. Can just do a very simple, if it's okay, yes or no. I'm going to try to ask it as a simple yes or no question. Are you familiar with USC 1325?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Yes.
You're not? Okay. So the law passed in 1952 is the Immigration Naturalization Act. It talked about how the country controls immigration. Mr. Wolf, start with you. Do you think that we made a mistake passing that law that prohibits people from entering this country illegally?
No, I don't think that's a mistake.
Sheriff, do you believe we made a mistake passing that law?
No, I don't think so.
Ms. Vaughn?
No.
Sabrina?
It was a mistake to not let them come legally. That's what we need.
But that's not what the law said. The law said you can't enter the country illegally. Was that
There were
part,
definitely mistakes in the INA.
Was that
Many
part,
mistakes.
Don't be cute. Was that part of the law a mistake? Yes or no?
The part of the law that says you can't come legally, yes, that was a mistake.
That was a mistake that you can't come illegally.
No, legally. Legally is what I said.
Okay. So you haven't answered my question, but that's okay. You're a smug guy, and that's part of your shtick. How about you?
I don't know anything about this law.
Do you think it should be a crime to enter the country illegally?
I don't know anything about this. I'm here to talk about budgets with the budget.
You don't have to, look, I'm not a lawyer, you don't have to be a lawyer. It's a simple question. Should it be a crime, I'll say it slowly, should it be a crime to enter the United States of America illegally?
I don't know
without
anything
permission?
about this.
Do you have a home?
I rent.
Do you have a place that you sleep in?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Should it be a crime for people to enter your home without permission?
Yes.
You're pretty certain on that one?
Yes.
Okay, but you're not sure if it's okay to enter America without permission, which is our home, by the way. You don't know about America. Okay, gotcha. All right, so this is the best the Democrats can come up with, Mr. Chairman. I hope the ranking member can listen for just a second, if you don't mind. This is the best witnesses you've got. A guy who can't distinguish whether it's okay to have people enter our country illegally. Of all the millions of people that you could have chosen to testify.
To my good colleague.
Let me finish. The best you have is a guy who has no idea what our immigration law is and isn't sure if somebody should enter the country illegally. Another guy is a smug guy who obviously has an agenda. And in fact, let me just ask you a question, because I was just asking
Maybe
flat.
stick to the facts instead of badgering
No,
the
not
witnesses.
not badgering the witnesses.
Well, you're
I'm asking
attacking them.
simple questions.
Yeah, why don't you ask them actual
But
factual
why don't you do this?
questions?
Why don't you speak when it's your turn? Because we actually
You're
take turns.
addressing me, so I'm addressing you back.
Because
You're looking right at me. You're addressing me.
Here's what I find ironic is that you follow rules here about speaking order. People can't speak out of turn, but it's okay with you that people enter our country and skip the turn. See,
Now you're attributing views to me I haven't expressed. Isn't that interesting?
What I would love to find interesting.
Not only you're attacking witnesses, now you're attacking your colleagues here on the dais.
So
I think very
gentlemen,
inappropriate.
You make it easy. All right, back to you.
Wait a minute. I'm in charge.
Yes, sir.
You ask him a question.
Yes.
He'll get a chance to answer that question. Finish your time.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the next question, Mr. Sheriff. How important is it for local law enforcement to cooperate with federal officials?
I can tell you it's worked for us, and it's kept our crime rate down extraordinarily low.
So if somebody is in your position in Hamilton County, which is the county where Cincinnati is, or the Cincinnati Chief of Police, would you advise them that you think it's helpful to cooperate with law enforcement?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you find it interesting that that politicians who have no idea, no background in law enforcement will pass laws that prohibit law enforcement to cooperate with federal officials, local law enforcement? Do you think that's a good idea?
No, it's not a good idea.
It's a terrible idea. Do you have death threats against your sheriff deputies on a regular basis?
We get threats, not that often, but we do.
Constant death threats, or do you get
No,
constant?
not constant death threats, but we do get threats, yes.
Do you have drug cartels that have bounties out for your deputies?
No, we don't.
Do you get your agents doxxed where they go to your agents, your deputies' homes and threaten their children and their wives and their kids?
No, we have not.
Do you get politicians that call your deputies Gestapo and Nazis?
We've had certainly not politicians, not locally here, but certainly we've had a lot of people in the community that have said that.
Do you find any of that helpful when talking about law enforcement agencies? Because see, here's the irony. What we're disparaging is the people whose job it is to enforce the laws. And I find it extraordinarily interesting that the people in charge of making these laws are disparaging the people who are enforcing those laws. And I wonder, and I'll ask for the record if the minority witnesses could just sign an affidavit that they have not received any money and the organization that they work for or participate in from any organizations tied to the Mexican drug cartels, which would have an absolute incentive to have illegal migration at the levels that we saw under Biden.
If you have any reason.
We haven't accepted any drug cartel money.
Okay.
Again, if they could just put that in affidavit or an affiliated organization.
You okay, Mr. Duke?
I'd like to look at the affidavit.
Okay, fair enough. But do you know if you've accepted any money?
I do not know of anything like that.
Right. Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you. All right, so good hearing. Senator Merkley, I'll let you go first. I'll have a few words and we'll go vote.
Well, let's start with the Gang of Eight that my colleague referred to from 2013. Democrats and Republicans came together, 4-4. They crafted a bill on immigration. It was all about the rule of law on the border. Democrats and Republicans together saying the rule of law matters. And it addressed many of the immigration challenges that we have in different sectors, be it employment, agriculture, a path to citizenship for people who'd been here a long time, path to citizenship for dreamers, Democrats and Republicans together. So one of the myths we've heard today from some of my colleagues is that Democrats don't support the rule of law. Absolutely wrong. What happened to that 2013 bill that went over to the House of Representatives, controlled by Republicans? They would not even hold a hearing on it. They wanted to keep an open sore of immigration as a political issue. In 2024, Democrats and Republicans in the Senate came together again, crafted a deal, and it was President Trump as a candidate who said, don't do it, I want to keep immigration as an election issue. So I just think it would be more productive if we quit casting aspersions across the aisle and go back to the philosophy of 2013 and work together to actually get a bill done, or the philosophy of 2024. And certainly all of us agree in going after violent criminals. That's the second myth that was presented today, that people don't support going after violent criminals. Absolutely a myth, and it's just irritating to continuously hear that. Myth number 3 from one of my colleagues was that Democrats won't fund FEMA. In fact, last week in the Senate, we asked unanimous consent to fund FEMA and the Coast Guard and TSA, and it was the Republicans that objected. So let's clear up that piece. The next myth, that is that undocumented individuals receive benefits. It is illegal under the law for undocumented individuals to receive Medicaid or Medicare or CHIP or SNAP or Social Security benefits. Another myth, that states that have decided that local police are more effective being local police somehow attract immigrants because they're not held accountable to the law. They are held accountable to the law. In fact, you have lower crime rates in those states. So that's kind of interesting. And in fact, we see that some states, like Texas, they have 50% more undocumented immigrants as a ratio of population than Oregon does. So clearly it's not Oregon's policies that say we're more effective and safer and more prosperous when ICE does ICE and local police do local police work. And yet another myth. One of my colleagues across the aisle said states do not have powers. He says they do not have rights, but they do have powers, 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the U.S. by the Constitution are reserved to the states and to the people. And that is why the federal government cannot commandeer individuals in the states to do federal responsibilities. It's called the Constitution of the United States of America. Another myth was that it's less safe in states where local police do local police work. There's many statistics that show the opposite of that. But let's just take, for example, where is the highest murder rate in America? Is it in a state where local police are assigned to local police? No. It's Mississippi. Who's the second highest murder rate? Louisiana. How's the murder rate in Oregon? It is 1/4 of what is in those states. So let's be clear again, this myth that you have higher crime rates in places where the local police gain the trust of the people, work carefully between state and local and with federal officials, but they don't do the work of ICE. And if ICE knows that someone is in a jail, and they know because it's in the federal database, in the FBI database, and they want that person, it only takes a couple days to go get a judicial warrant and pick that person up. Every time there's a judicial warrant, that person is held. So if it's just being lazy or sloppy or whatever else, there's a whole lot of misinformation coming forward here that needed to be corrected.
Well, thank you very much. I have a different view of things. Really appreciate the hearing. Obama deported 3 million people. I don't think all of them were criminals. They didn't use judicial warrants. What you're trying to do is make it impossible to deport people. If you have to go to a judge and get a judicial warrant to deport somebody, you effectively destroy the ability to deport. You're denying Trump the same system you are giving Obama. This hearing to me is stunning. I'm so glad we had it. You're all in on sanctuary city policy. If you're looking to America, if you're looking for anybody to change this system, our Democratic friends have no interest. They think it's good for America. The more illegal immigrants, the better. I don't. I'd like to have a rational immigration system. Gang of 8, I was involved in it. What we try to do is stop future flow, and the trade-off was to give people a pathway to citizenship, knowing you would stop future flow. You're right, the House blocked the bill. During 2020 to 2024, Joe Biden destroyed every concept of rational immigration. He made it impossible for a Republican to sit down and talk with a Democrat because during his 4 years, he took every rule and ignored it. There are no taxpayer dollars associated with legal immigrants. They were flown into the country on airplanes. They were bussed in. They were fed. They were giving housing. 11 million people are not living in the streets. They're in some apartment or a house somewhere. And if you don't think that affects housing, that's crazy. 11 million people came at least in a 4-year period. And to hear you say it, no impact on this country. That's just absurd. So what are we going to do? We're going to try to start with the magnets. If you don't think sanctuary city policy is a magnet for future illegal immigration, that's just insane. How can you fix it if you don't take the magnets off the table? The bottom line is, I want a vote on my bill to hold local and state officials accountable for violating federal law when they should enforce it, like they did during Obama, and you won't let me have a vote. You won't let me have the debate. The reason you don't want to vote is because 70 to 80% of the American public think the policies you're pushing are harmful. There is a budget impact to being overrun in a country in a 4-year period. To think this is not a problem is insulting to the American people. It is a problem. And you try to rationalize it and make it a good thing. It's not a good thing, it's a bad thing. At the end of the day, if you can't answer the question, it should be a crime to come into the country legally, that says all you really need to know about the people here. Of course it should be. It should be a crime, as Senator Moreno said, to go in your house without being voted. We cannot have a sovereign nation when people just show up and come in and go anywhere they want to go. That's just not rational. We've got more people on the terrorist watch list than we've ever had, 2,700%. The people who've come here are all not well-meaning. I understand immigration pretty well. I understand the need to fix it. The American people want to be fair, but Senator Merkley, they're not going to buy into a system that constantly allows people to come in unchecked. Once you can prove to them you've stopped illegal immigration, then we could have a rational discussion about what to do with people who've been here a long time. But you've doubled or tripled the number of people. So all I will say, this is a debate worthy of a great nation. Our Democratic friends are accepting of a sanctuary policy. They don't think it's a problem. I do. Let's have a debate. Let's have a vote. This will be good for the country going into 2026 as to who should be in charge of controlling our borders and enforcing law. This administration is enforcing the law. The prior administration obliterated the law. Thank you very much to all of you for coming. I appreciate your time and attention. Senator Merkley, thank you. The hearing is adjourned. And, one second. I want to introduce a statement. Yeah, you can finish up. Donald Rosenberg was unable to be here. I'd like to put his statement in the record. He represents victims of legal alien crime. Without objection, I'd like to introduce his statement, if that's okay. Is it okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I want to thank our witnesses for preparing for the committee. You want to finish your thought? Go ahead.
Mr. Beer, you have a pile of documents. Did you want to enter those into the record? What are those documents?
Without objection.
These are all the studies.
Okay.
These are all the studies that show that immigrants do not increase crime, and places that place restrictions on ICE cooperation are not resulting in an increase in crime.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Okay. The hearing record will remain open until noon tomorrow for the submission of questions for the record to the committee clerk. The hearing is adjourned. Thank you all very, very much.